Farhana's the director of Film4 and has overseen projects like All of Us Strangers and the upcoming H is for Hawk and the History of Sound. She was previously a senior development and production executive at the BFI, with other key credits including Wicked Little Letters, Wild Horse 9, and The Voice of Hind Rahab. We've got Michael here. Michael is a BAFTA and Silver Bear winning director with works including Welcome to Sarajevo, The Trip, and 24-Hour Party People. He's got an eclectic body of work, and co-founded the production company Revolution Films, through which he makes a lot of his work. And he's worked with a host of names and actors such as Dev Patel, Angelina Jolie, Woody Harrelson, and studied English at Balliol. So, an alum. We've got Suzanne. Suzanne is an executive producing powerhouse in the TV industry, leading Emmy and BAFTA award-winning shows. Suzanne worked as the creative director at Left Bank Pictures, and during that time, she brought to life The Crown, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with that show. Since 2020, Suzanne set up her own production company, Orchid Pictures, and through that has been making stunning television, soon to be releasing an Agatha Christie adaptation. And last but not least, we have Charles. He is one of the UK's leading entertainment lawyers. He has represented almost all of the major studios in the film and TV sphere. He worked in LA in some of the studios before coming to England again to set up the film and TV group at Wigan and turning it into the largest entertainment legal team. And he initiated the lobbying of the UK government for the UK high-end TV tax credit, which, if you don't know, essentially revolutionized the TV industry. And now executive produces and has worked on a recent project, you might know it, The Coral, with Ray Fiennes. And then a little bit about me. I'm Mohammed. I studied law here, but I work in the TV industry now. In many ways, I'm similar to you in a sense, making my way in the film and TV industry, writing and directing. And let's jump in. Thanks so much, guys, for being here. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. Nice and easy, bit of a broad question. We'll just go around the panel for this one. What was it that got you wanting to be in the industry? What was the spark that started it off? If we start with Michael.
So I used to watch a lot of telly at home, then started watching films. I did a little bit of like making, whilst I did, I also did a little bit, there was a film workshop up in Headington. There's a little bit of kind of messing around with Super 8 there. Then went to Bristol for a year, did a film course there after leaving here. And then got a job as a trainee assistant film editor at Thames TV, and sort of gradually sort of worked my way up from there. I just enjoy watching films. I used to enjoy watching films.
Passion.
When I left university, I actually I thought I was going to work in like a corporate space, and I went to Google. But then I realized very quickly after a year of selling AdWords that actually that wasn't the career path I wanted. And I kept coming back to film because when I was at university, I started this film festival which is now called Water Sprite, which is a student film festival. And that was where I met lots of filmmakers, and that was the thing that I kept coming back to. So I think after being in the corporate world for about a year, I was like, okay, is there something I could do in film? And then I approached one of the people who had come to speak at the festival to see whether they were looking for somebody in their production company. They hired me as a development assistant, and then that was sort of my first foray into film and TV.
Charles?
Well, I always loved film, but I didn't have any talent. So I don't think I had any talent. So I sort of went I sort of found out there was this amazing thing called entertainment law, which I'd never heard about before, and I sort of went into that way. And then I thought, well, maybe this is a route into the sort of the independent film space. And I just got caught up in the whole business side of it, and ended up going to Paramount in LA, and sort of went from there. Really.
I mean, likewise, just childhood of being obsessed with film and television and dreaming of drama all the time, and not quite knowing what to do with it or what the channels were, to be honest, and ended up going to drama school. Really found myself there, But very much what I realised when I was at drama school was that I loved working with the director and the writer and working on the text, and so I look back and realised that was sort of early signs of a producer maybe emerging in me. But then I left and couldn't bear the idea of the phone not ringing, and realised I probably wasn't talented enough to be an actress, but drama was still my absolute love. And so I got a job at the BBC in very, very low entry level job in the drama department under Michael Waring. I remember seeing you and Andrew Eaton cooking up The Family. And I remember thinking that was a stunning piece of work and exactly why I wanted to be in that drama department. It happened to be, I think, the most exciting time in television, and very I just absorbed it all. And I left there, joined a production company when independent companies were sort of having a bit more ownership and rights, which was a very interesting time. And in that very early stage of my career, I was quite young still, I found the Calendar Girls story in sort of page 4 of The Guardian or something like that, and thought, oh, that would make a good film, and pursued it heavily. And I very much put it together, and I had a quite a strong vision for it. And so that was my first producing gig, and I was probably the least experienced person on the whole set, but I had it in my heart. I felt like I was the custodian of that story, and I felt very strongly I knew how to tell that story. And then from there I went on and found my way into film, and the rest of my career sort of slowly but surely came to pass.
In that vein of how one started into the industry, I think many in the audience might be thinking, what's the first step? What's that first kind of trigger to pull when it comes to trying to make one's way into the industry? And I'm hearing some slightly interesting and varied parts. Mike, if we could just go back to you for a second. I mean, is it your view that, say, nowadays or back then, but maybe for the young generation, that say if they want to be a filmmaker, the best step is to just go and make a film, or is that still kind of the
I don't think there is a kind of obvious route. Everyone's got to do what they want to do and what they can do. I mean, when I started, it was a long time ago, so you had to have a union card to get a job, really. So I like I said, I made little bits and pieces. But I went Bristol. Going to Bristol was good because it was like a really small course of 9 people. So like you got to know each other quite well. Knowing people, you're not necessarily, obviously knowing people because you're friends with is good, but if you work with people, that's the best way of like getting some sort of start. So, but then at the time you had to have a unit card. So I got a job, like I say, a training assistant editor, and the system was a bit, more rigid in those days. I think really basically you got to try and get any job you can, and at the same time do as many of your own projects as you can. So in the daytime make some money, and but try and work in any level, and in the evenings do the stuff you actually want to do.
And just kind of bouncing or contrasting film to say something like entertainment law and that sphere, is that more of a charted path? Was it more clear how one goes into that sphere, working in that environment?
I suppose so. Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to go into that side of it, then you do the traditional route, and then I suppose you'd look to go into. Some people go in house to a production company or a broadcaster. Some people go to a firm, and and you can go that way. And it's you can either stay doing the legal side, or potentially some people break out and go into business and acquisitions or distribution, and there's lots of different areas that you can follow from there.
And are you noticing in filmmakers, young filmmakers and new voices, are there trends with how they went about beginning their career, or is it as Michael said, a kind of there really is no one defined route?
I mean, so as part of Film4, we work with a lot of emerging filmmakers. So I'm constantly looking for emerging filmmakers. But I think the thing that we look at are shorts, commercials, music videos. And so, as Michael says, it's just trying to be making things that show the kind of filmmaker you are, what your style is, what your voice is. So I would say if you want to be a filmmaker, making things and then growing your voice or growing your portfolio is the way to get the attention of commissioners. but making things isn't cheap. So obviously, you know, doing stuff like commercials is great, doing stuff like music videos, growing your collaborators, your network, people that you trust, people who can help you realize your vision. That's also part of making things. And then, you know, we at Film4, we run some kind of early talent initiatives. We run this thing called Future Takes with the BFI, where we fund filmmakers to make shorts that, and we award budgets of up to £90,000, and that's like a really healthy budget for short films. And the idea for that is it's really people who are on the cusp of maybe making a feature, but are perhaps missing a body of work.
Bringing up that maybe at the beginning of one's career in this type of industry, it may be that the foray into the filmmaking part might be more of on the side or in addition to something that might not be necessarily related, and that can be, you know, how you make it work initially to then kind of go into.
Well, I think ideally you're working in the film industry,
Yeah.
whether you're making coffee or sweeping
Yes.
the floor,
Yeah.
but because it is about a network of people.
Yeah.
So if you work on a film or TV program, if you're on set, you're meeting like 80, 100 people every time you change job. You're meeting another 80, 100 people. So that is the way you build up people you know.
I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of the young directors I've been sort of following and watching, I've tried to, we on The Crown, it was so long, it was over 10 years and 60 episodes. So, and we'd have obviously a director per episode, or a block, depending on how, anyway. We would always try and find a young up and coming director, aspiring director, to work with them. And I've seen at least 3 of them go on to become directors in their own right, and they're now working constantly. And we were very careful how we chose those directors. But that, you know, those sort of opportunities, they're hard because they're often word of mouth and being in the right place at the right time. I was trying to say that to someone the other day, and I thought, how do I help that young director who I could see fantastic talent, fantastic short films, but they needed to get to that next stage. So I put them in touch with Stephen Daldridge. Stephen Daldridge's taken that person under his wing, thank God, which is brilliant. But and hopefully that will lead to something. But those are sort of by chance. And
I do think being a director's assistant as well is actually a really good way in. The director of Pillion, Harry Loughton, he was the assistant to Oliver Hermanus, who made History of Sound, and I just think that experience of like working so closely with the director as they're making a big feature film, like as you say, Michael, that exposes you to the whole process of making a film, even if you might not be making that film.
I think the other thing to mention, I guess, because Mark, you said you went to Bristol after Oxford to do a film course. Is the idea of, I'm assuming most people here aren't on the film course, so there's that idea, isn't there, of going to the NFTS or a London Film School or at the university to do an MA in film studies just to get those skills developed. I mean, it may not be the case for a writer, but maybe for a director or an editor or a DP or something to just, and also at that point, I guess you meet a lot of people and you can then maybe form a body of friends to make those short films. Yeah.
I think we've sort of skipped quite a lot of steps between leaving university and
exactly.
becoming a first-time director on The Crown. You know, it's the problem for most people is how do you make enough money to live, and especially if you don't come from London, how do you make enough money to rent a room in London? Because the film industry is horribly London-centric, and it costs £200 a week to have a room. And how do you pay for that? And that's one of the big problems. I think that people from the regions, people from outside the sort of communities from London, have incredibly hard. It's very, very difficult to find a job of entry level, a genuine entry level job in the film industry that pays enough to live.
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking about making films, but directing, but producing, I'd say, and that route, the sort of the development editorial route, which is the route where my heart is just to get a job, get a foot in the door. You just got to get a foot in the door. And I mean, I've watched, because I've been doing it so long, people come in that are sitting front of house, reception work, runners who are now producing, and they've really, worked 5 years just plugging away, reading scripts, going, just showing that talent, that passion, and then suddenly you hand them a script and they're doing some junior script editing work, and then the next time they're the script editor, and that takes them towards producing. And but it's just getting your foot in the door. And I've seen, and I really care about the next generation. And my son's your age and wants to be a filmmaker, and he wouldn't let me help him. But he's written something like 150 emails out to film companies and production companies, and just no answer. And it's very demoralising. You just have to keep going, and then something will suddenly, an opportunity will arise, and you've just got to get your foot in the door.
And in terms of, I know a lot of people here are quite proactive, and they've perhaps gone on to make something, or have produced something, or written something, and they've taken that little bit, and maybe they are working in the industry, maybe they're not. And I suppose the answer can vary in those two situations. But are there particularly effective, useful ways that someone can make use of what they've done and get people to see it? Are festivals worth it? Is there use to try and maybe have some sort of strategy sending it to specific people? Is there a good way that you can kind of let people know that you've made something?
I mean, there's so many different ways that people get discovered, and yes, festivals are amazing, but they're also not the be all and end all. And it's actually like so difficult to get a short into a festival. So there are lots of different ways to get your work seen, and people can put things up online. We've started looking at YouTube now as well, because there's so many incredible content creators on YouTube. There was a big film in Toronto called Obsession, a horror, that all the studios were like fighting over. There was a huge bidding war over it, and the filmmaker came from having made YouTube videos, and like that is so like I think that it does feel like people are looking at all platforms and all forms of content. Our team always goes to the Fringe. Like there's lots of different ways to get your work out there. I do think that to make a feature film, though, you do need to make some screen work, whether that's a short film or a pilot or a TV episode or something. I think you do need to have some screen work.
Mm-hmm. And in the case of people who are maybe more focused on writing, I mean, you must come across a lot of sort of just writers. Is there kind of a different sort of situation with writers when it's just more kind of piece of paper that harder to show around?
Yeah, there are agents, and agents would contact you and say, will you look at this? Will you read this? I think this writer is exciting. And we would, and we'd then meet them, and you build a relationship. So they're usually, they should have their finger on the pulse and know who's coming up. I mean, we'll go to the company I would run. We're all at the theatre all the time, and we'll go to see things all over London, and Chichester, and come up north, and so we're pretty diligent about whose voice is emerging and what's interesting. But I mean, if someone sent me an unsolicited script, I wouldn't have the time to read it. I'd have to have had it sent to me from an agent.
And then I think the agents discover. Well, we could maybe talk about agents.
Yeah, it'd be good to.
We can jump into agents. I think agents discover people from the short film festivals, from the Edinburgh Fringe, from
the theatre,
from TV.
So it's
small TV.
So the role of agents. I mean, I'm sure it's something people have heard, and I'm sure everyone's aware of that notion. But they are quite important. They are quite useful as that go-between. Is that how you guys see their role in the sphere?
Yeah, we as at Film4, we don't accept unsolicited material. It's got to come through an agent or a producer. If you're a director, it's finding a producer, and that doesn't have to be, a super established producer, someone who's got their own production company. It's just somebody who, and our job is to nurture the next generation of producers as well. But that there is a producer, somebody else who is also invested in you to make a financier, commissioner take interest. That is also a big part of it. I would say though, when we make short films, very often the directors don't yet have agents. They're people that we've discovered through music videos or other forms of short form content and perhaps haven't done a narrative short yet, and that's when they come to us. We do a narrative short film, and that's often the point at which an agent will sign them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And is there, I suppose, kind of an interesting other kind of question to that is there kind of too early though to get an agent? Is there something to be said for building up a body of work, and then that step might be suitable, or is there what's an appropriate timeline?
So I think an agent will tell you that they have that it's up to the talent to create something.
Yep.
If they just send a script to an agent, it's very hard. It's very hard to get representation, But I think the agent, if there's if the writer or the director's out there with these short films or whatever it might be, then the agents will generally discover them. And I don't think the earlier the better, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, of course, yeah. If they're interested.
And also, I think agents will only want to sort of represent you if they think they can do something with you. Like if they think they can call me up and say, you've got to watch this show, this director is going to be amazing as the next best thing, or this sample that they've written is just incredible, they've really got a voice. So I think they will only sign you if they see something in your work that they can then take out and pitch. If you're not quite at that point, maybe you still have got to write something else or direct something else to show that you've got a voice that they can then take out. So I think sometimes it's not necessarily like how early you are in your career, just whether that voice is formed or visible yet to somebody else.
But they they'll often see a spark.
Yeah.
And it's that, isn't it? And by the way, it's thrilling and deeply meaningful to us when we do engage with someone that's at the beginning of their career. I mean, it's fantastic to be part of someone's early blossoming. I mean, it's So it's not that we if we put barriers up, it's not for that reason. It's really thrilling to be able to discover someone, and I don't mean that in an egotistical way. I hope I don't. And just watch them take off. So we all love that.
And let's say someone has done something that is maybe getting quite a bit of attention. Potentially they have an agent already, but it's their first project, maybe a first feature. Is there? I often hear people talk about that second project, that second thing. Something's been quite challenging. That idea of kind of you've done one thing that's great, but then how do you turn that into how do you keep the momentum? And Michael, I mean, you're a very prolific filmmaker. It'd be interesting to hear from you, particularly in the early stages of your career, when you found that success. How did you keep that momentum going?
Well, I think it is difficult. I mean, this is a very different conversation. But during lockdown, I did a book for the BFI, which was interviewing 15 British directors who'd all started in independent films, sort of range people from sort of Lynn Ramsey to Edgar Wright to Steve McQueen, a whole range of people, all people that I really admired, all people who had a big success in the independent cinema. And about 2/3 of them have made fewer than a handful of independent films in Britain. They all had great careers. They'd gone they'd either gone back to theatre, they'd gone back to TV, they'd gone into studio films in America, they'd gone abroad. People like Paweł Pawlikowski, but people like Lynn or Andrew Arnold or Paweł Pawlikowski, they've been making films for 20 odd years. And I think Lynn has made 2 films here. Paweł made 3 films, he would say 2, but really 3 films here. His first film, he doesn't count, before he left. Andrew made 3 or 4. And that seems to me is a big shame, not for them individually, they're all really happy. And the whole book was not about the films, but about the process of trying to make films. But I think it's a big problem a big shame for British film culture. I do think independent cinema has probably always been, but certainly this country has become a place which is a stepping stone. A bit like you do your short film, then you might get a feature, then you do one feature, maybe you do a second feature, and then you go to America or you do a studio film or whatever. It's no longer seen as something that you spend your career making 20, 30, 40, 50 films like the great film directors did in that area of where this is my project, I'm developing it, I'm making it. It's a shame, mate.
Yeah, I think it's worth actually saying that, picking up on that, is the difference between TV and film in the UK. Because TV is a sort of what I call a sort of quite a mature, sensible business, where people actually have production companies, and they have junior executives they take on, and they build up a business, and they're developing a few projects at a time, and it's easy. I won't say easy, but it's maybe a more of a sort of you're able to build up a sort of a momentum of projects. With film, it's no matter how sort of successful you are, it's almost every time you make a film, you're kind of starting all over again, and it's a sort of little cottage industry of the production companies in the UK, with very few examples of just one or two people with maybe an assistant, which I guess explains that. Really, there's not that. I mean, in the Scandinavia, like Bergman, they have that enormous amount of public funding which sort of gets behind their projects, and in the UK, as amazing as the BBC, the BFI, and Film4 are, they haven't got the funds to make enormous amounts of projects, and even then, you can only make you only take a minority part of the project. You can't fully finance.
Yeah, I would I think one of the big issues in film right now that we're sort of living through is that the rising cost of productions is really expensive to make things, but the value of films has gone down. And so when we're making films, like, it's really expensive to make them, but at the same time, like, there's not as much money available to make them. And so we don't fully finance. When we're making projects, we often develop the script, we pay for the script, we're one of the financiers, and then we're taking it out to other financiers, and we're kind of putting together the finance plan. And there's two ways of making films. When you make it with a studio, you have a studio who are fully financing it, and then they are also releasing it, and they're the machine behind it. And then some of these other films, like films by Pavel or Andrea Arnold, like, they're made independently, and the sort of the pool of financiers who are available to make those independent films is shrinking. And so it is becoming increasingly difficult to make films independently. And I think just one of the challenges we're seeing is just that because value has gone down, it becomes harder and harder. You might have an amazing filmmaker, but it becomes harder and harder to actually put the projects together.
And TV's not. I mean, not to be too doom and gloom, but I mean, trying to get a green light in television these days is and everyone's saying it's tough because co-production finance has become more and more challenging. So the BBC really struggling to, and I do a lot with Netflix, which is great, but in their success, they've got so many shows now. So you're vying for what are only going to be, they'll only make out of the drama department 10 shows a year, and you've got 5 things on your slate. You just go, well, actually, probably only one of them will get green lit. And you think, well, the rest of them are still really good, and I couldn't bear it for any of them not to be made. And yet that's the reality. You have to face that prospect. And so it just does become really hard, and it's particularly hard at the moment, not to discourage any of you, because it's always cyclical. And I've been in my 2008 was a terrible, when the whole film industry just sort of seemed to collapse, and it comes back again, and you do have to just ride it out. But it has been pretty tough for a while, hasn't it? I mean, really, the hardest I've known it to be.
Is that we don't need to touch on this for too long here,
No,
but I mean, we see about the rise of streamers and those sorts of services. Has that had a role in this sort of landscape, do you guys think, or is it
definitely
an
in the
artifact of
film
something
landscape?
else?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Well, it was positive for a while because Netflix suddenly started commissioning enormous amounts of films, and then it sort of goes down. And
but not so many in the UK.
No.
I mean, it's like we
Well,
watch films, but how many Netflix films are actually UK films?
No.
I mean, perhaps one or two recently, but for a long time, almost nothing.
No.
Yeah. I mean, the good news is we do have some great sort of tax incentives, and and an independent, the independent tax incentives now is sort of between 30 and 40% of a film's budget, and there's a growing amount of, without going into detail, as a result of the tax incentive, there's a growing amount of co-production coming back into, which is great for UK producers because it gives them an opportunity to work with, producers in other territories, and in those other territories you can access money. So independent film has always been difficult, but it's a sort of it's every project you create a little jigsaw around that project of funding. there's I looked at some of the credits on some of the little UK films that have been made this year, and they're UK Italian and UK. There's lots of little co-productions going on. So, and there's fit funding. All the regions have funding. Scottish Screen, Welsh funding. There's lots of funding around, but it's it's
tough.
It's quite tough.
One positive I just want to say, because there are some positives, in the UK is that we are, like, filmmakers and production companies are really privileged, I think, in the UK to be able to rely on places like Film4, BBC Film and the BFI to develop projects. And that is a culture that doesn't exist in many other countries. And the fact that as producers and writers and directors, you can get paid to develop, and then you also control the destiny of those projects. That is, if used well, that can be a real advantage, because you can develop scripts and then take them out to a whole range of financiers or partners. So I would say, if you're starting out, one of the key things you can do is just like develop and pour your energy into developing really good projects that can be set up or attract cool talents or collaborators.
We touched on this a bit before, briefly, but I mean, I think a lot of people in the audience probably hear about the film and TV world being quite people-based, and it's always good to have kind of context and people that Is that true? And is that particularly more important at certain moments in time? And are there ways in which people can go about building up a kind of professional sort of network? Suzanne, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what Michael said. For me, that many moons ago, entry-level job, we all grew up together and we all then disappear, and you don't see each other for a year. One person's gone to the BBC and another one's gone over there, but you sort of stay in touch, and then suddenly you're back working together again, and they become your fellow travellers. Some of the closest people in my life are people I knew in my 20s and I still know, and they're part of my life, and we all pick up the phone to each other. And one of my assistants is now the head of drama at the BBC. I mean, and she's a very important person to me, and that's how you sort of just grow up together. But we all started at, we didn't go in grand. We started in very runner type jobs, which is great.
And from a creative perspective, I think, as you mentioned, you like to see people having collaborations and maybe a body of individuals that they know and work with. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think that when you're making things, you start having the HODs, those early relationships, and it's always so exciting to see like somebody who's done something really well in a short. And I'm not talking about director, but an HOD will then go off to do other great stuff. And I think those collaborations that are formed early in one's work can grow, but that's not to say you can't find new collaborators as well. I think there's also a benefit in kind of constantly opening out your world. Yeah,
and I think the relationship between the producer and the director, I mean, I've worked a lot sort of over and over again with the same directors, but also the same writer. You tend to find the people that you feel very creatively simpatico with, and I've worked with Peter Morgan a lot, and I'm just doing his next show, which starts filming next week, but 2 weeks time. But that's built up over many years of just trust, and you end up getting each other, and you had long relationships with producers, and I think if you can find that sort of central team that you just sort of you just go forth together. And then you split off, but then you come back again, and that I see that frequently.
Also, I think picking up what Farhana said about development, because not all of your projects can get picked up by Film4 and BBC. There are loads of, you only have a limited amount of funds, and so if you can develop a project with a writer and if a director, writer, producer can get together and self-develop without it costing anything, that's fantastic, because you've got if everybody's sort of throwing in their skill set in the development stage, and you can actually get to a point where you develop something without having to go out to an outside investor. Development money is hard to find because it's very risky money, because not every developed project gets made, and so there's not many finances out there willing to put their money into their pocket for development. So I know a lot of writer-directors or director-producers who've sort of worked over the years together and been able to kind of create a project themselves.
In that vein, actually, Michael, you've had, as Suzanne mentioned, collaborations with writers, with producers, with actors, particularly say in the case of the trip. Have you found that quite beneficial when then going on to make a project?
Yeah, I set up with a producer, Andreessen Revolution, a long time ago when we were just really starting. We've done some TV stuff like Family, the Roddy Doyle thing and that, but in order to just have a bit of protection so that you didn't have to be employed by, like, you weren't just a freelance director working with someone else. And you know, it's like when you start making stuff, it's kind of timing is very important. That you need to, you know, if you're a director but the producer's separate to you, that you're both like sort of wanting to make the same thing at the same time is tricky. So we worked, you know, we set up a little company, and it's not part of it anymore, but we still have the company, and it's like it's just to give a little bit of environment of continuity, you know. And I think that is important if you want to try and keep working with stuff. And when we did the book, to go back to interviewing directors, like the two that made most by far were, interestingly, the two oldest, Ken Loach and Mike Leigh. But and I think partly that is generational, that they started in the 60s, and that was, you know, it's at different times. But I think also they may be able to keep going and making a lot of films because they both like were in a little production company. They had producing partners. They were a team. They weren't just a director out there sort of trying to find the right project or you know, even try and create it by themselves. You know, it is all filmmaking, all TV making is very, very collaborative. And the more people you have in your team, the kind of easier and more enjoyable it is.
Yeah.
And I guess it'd be fair to say that competition is probably you know, you don't want to try and be competitive. You want to uplift everyone around you as everyone else kind of in your generation gets better. Your collaborators, presumably, then they assist you, and then you
in your team, yeah. It's like football. You want your team to do well.
Yeah, but you do. I know what you mean though, because you do want to see success, because that, you know, it's important to sort of feel like, okay, we're doing something at the moment. You know.
Yeah.
Even if you're not involved in it, things are happening.
And just to go, this is somewhat of a left field question, but I think it's one that is relevant, and it's necessary to ask. I think AI, we've seen it, you know, creating stuff, and I think it's kind of still a bit of a peculiar sort of topic when it comes to, like, you know, making an actual film. But it is. I mean, it's getting better year on year. So, you know, and kind of markedly so. And I'm curious. We don't need to spend too long on this, but do you think that it's going to change the landscape, for better, for worse? Maybe you don't have too much of an opinion on it. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
I don't have much of an opinion on it.
I mean, it's changing so fast, isn't it? I mean, the only bit I can talk about, because I'm right in the middle of it, is that we're doing something called Boys from Brazil, which starts filming in 2 weeks' time, as I said. And the characters span. This isn't probably entirely what you. Right. The question slightly, the answer slightly over here, but the actors have to age, span 30 years, and so someone said, well, we could just use AI to. And I thought, oh no. Really, and they're in the future because of AI. I mean, already we're just going, well, and yeah, that's.
I guess there's maybe a line kind of in when it becomes sort of too encroaching, some might say. But I suppose it's early stages and probably a lot of subjectivity, I think, at this point. And speaking more widely in terms of change, because I think as many industries are, you know, they're susceptible to change, and I think film and TV is obviously a great example of that. Are there, in your respective careers, are there any standout things that, say, compared to when you started, you've noticed, like, wow, this is a market difference, and better for worse, you know, either side of that coin? I mean, potentially from a directing perspective, there must be, you know, kind of filmmaking.
Not really, I don't think. I mean, it's like, you know, if you look back at films, you know, sort of I mean, basically, it's not complicated. The sort of sort of films I make, the sort of films that a lot of independent films are. It's like you have a bunch of people and you have a camera and you're filming and then you edit it. And the fact whether the camera's a film camera or a digital camera, whether you're editing on film or on a computer, it doesn't really make that much difference to the actual story. Whatever the story is you're telling. If you can, if you watch films by say Godard back at 60 years ago, they're kind of he's freewheeling in the street, handheld camera, no available light. That's great, it's brilliant, and it's like this. It's no different now. And that's why, just to go back to that point, that's why filmmaking is no more complicated. If you're working in that area, filmmaking is no more complicated than it was then. And yet, all the directors there, whether you're working whether you work in Hollywood or studio films or independent films in France or Sweden or Italy or wherever, everyone was making way more. Everyone was making 20, 30, 40, 50 films in their career instead of 5, 6, 7, 8 films in their career. So there's been, they talk about British productivity being a problem, but film directors' productivity worldwide has crashed over the last 50 years for no reason, or for commercial reasons.
Can I ask, do you think in all those instances of people want to make
Yes,
films? Because
yes.
I, for example, work with some filmmakers who take so long to make a film.
Yeah, but there would be a cross section. But I don't think people 60 years ago, all the great directors 60 years ago, were people just happened to be people who want to make lots of films, and now they're all people who want to make one every 5 years. I think the culture these days doesn't expect you to make very many, and so there's definitely sort of like, I think there's a marketplace which is we don't want a film every year from you because that's going to be annoying, or people haven't got enough money, so we can only finance you once every 5 years, depending on what sort of filmmaker you are. And it's like, but I don't think people have changed. I think, and it is so hard. You spend so long trying to make your first film. The idea that after that you don't really want to make it one for 5 years, I just think it's not true. Most people would love to go out and make another film and another film and another film, but the world, the environment doesn't support that.
Well, it's just to add to that, it's much, to make a debut film, there's lots of funds or initiatives or support to make a debut. To then make a follow-up work, there's that kind of support and infrastructure that exists no longer exists, and you're kind of out in the big wild commercial sector, and I think that's the challenge, is like, once you've made one with a lot of support, how can you make sure that you have enough interest to make the second? I think that is true.
Yeah, and I think perhaps the support. There are no sort of funds for fourth-time filmmakers or fifth-time filmmakers. But maybe there should be. Maybe I think perhaps other cultures. I don't know anything about it. But when you hear about the French system, it always seems to be that actually, as you make more, it gets you sort of get more. You get more sort of back as well. And that this, I think, when you go to a film festival and a third of the films or more are first-time directors, clearly, just statistically, that means people aren't going to make very many films. I think the average, when we did the book, we looked at the figures then, the average number of films a film director in Britain made, if they'd make, obviously this was people who already made one, the average number was less than 2. So it's like it's just the crazy system where they support people to make one, but there'd be no support to make your second or your third or your fourth. As well, let's have, it's just kind of not an environment that really encourages this ongoing for filmmaking career, and you kind of hope that people who make 10, 15 films, that is, it's partly a skill, isn't it? It's partly a craft, and it's a shame to only make 2.
I think obviously some people, they write they're short, they make their short film, and it's exactly this is what they, it's exactly the kind of film that they've always dreamed of making. But I would have said that the second film, even if their instincts aren't massively commercial, they want, that maybe for the second film they should think about, because obviously the budget will have to be relatively low. They would maybe think about doing something, more of a commercial to get that recognition. Maybe a genre film or a comedy film or something like that. Not massively ambitious film, in order to just get that credit in that second film on the way and have a chance, because those sorts of lower budget films in that space maybe have a bit more of a chance to get picked up and be successful.
And I suppose the other, another answer to your question is in television. I mean, obviously, when I started out, when you would have started out, there was just the BBC, ITV, and Channel 4, or Channel 4 was in its infancy, and now, of course, you've got, all the streamers, and you've got Amazon and Apple, but weirdly, I don't think it's necessarily that much easier, because I think with it there are so many production companies and there are so many people with projects, and there just simply aren't enough slots. So that's a sort of the landscape's kind of wider and bigger, but at the same time it seems almost as hard as it ever was, really, to try and get a project off the ground. But yeah.
And kind of coming and looking at the future filmmaking through the other sort of side of the coin, and this will be my last question before I hand it over to you guys. What is exciting for you about the future of making TV or making film? We can start with you, Suzanne, perhaps.
Oh God. I mean, I look. We've some of what we've been saying must feel a bit daunting, but I mean, it is a. I love. I can't. I pinch myself every day that I do what I do. I think it's the most fantastic job, and I work with just wonderful people, and it's great fun, and yeah, it is a fantastic job. I don't know what's exciting. I mean, you only look at what you're doing, and I'm just thrilled to have got where I am, to be working with such talent, and that I didn't come from a sort of glittering academic background. I really I didn't have any shoe-in or anyone to help me. I felt very much on my own, like with this obsession with film and television. I didn't know what to do with it, but you just sort of follow your instinct. And actually, what I'm most pleased about, proud of, if you like, is that those instincts are the thing that have taken me forward. And it's taken me years to find the confidence to say that, and not. I always shrunk back and thought, well, there are much more intelligent people around me, and but actually, it is just that instinct that I've learned to constantly listen to and follow that instinct, and it tends to take you in the right direction. And as Michael said, you're a team, and you're working with a team, and to love working with a team and to bounce off each other, and you all bring something to it, and you all have different. I mean, I came out from a writer's room earlier for something for next year, and each one of us, we were all different ages and different backgrounds, and each one of us had something, a different sensibility, but we were all coming towards the same ambition with a shared vision, and that's thrilling. That it's just simple, but it's where it's at, I think.
Charles?
A couple of things. I think the talent coming out of the UK is always exciting. There's a reason the Americans come over here so much to make their stuff. It's because they absolutely love the UK actors, the crew, the talent. Whatever we're doing well in that respect. And I think some of the technology is quite. The fact that you can make a movie on your iPhone, the fact that actually some of the AI is quite exciting. I think there's a film called The Creator the other year. Gareth Edwards directed it.
Yes.
I think he pretty much made it in his bedroom, and yet it looks like an enormous sci-fi movie. So there's things like that which can open up the world. And actually, as Farhana said, keep costs down, which are and make a film which looks a lot more than its budget. So there's two things.
I'm so excited by some of the filmmakers that we're working with, and I feel like there's a huge interest in British voices, especially female British voices right now. And like when we're taking out projects, I'm finding like the French sales agents, Spanish distributors are just so interested when we have like a film from a British female voice. And we're working with Molly Manning Walker, who we did How to Have Sex with. We're doing her second feature right now. We're just doing a TV series with her. She's just got such an amazing energy and exciting voice to come out of the UK. We're just about to, we're working with Rose Glass on her third feature film, an amazing genre director who's come out of the UK and can sort of attract really high profile actors. We're making a film with Georgia Oakley, who did Blue Jean and is now just making a studio film, Sense and Sensibility, with Focus. And we've got a film with her after that. And I just feel like there's so many exciting and very different female voices coming out of the UK, which we haven't seen in a while. And I sort of, I grew up idolizing people like Andrea Arnold and Lynn Ramsey. So seeing the next generation of those voices is super exciting to me. And then I also feel like some of the things I'm loving right now are things that are just so daring and provocative that they can only exist as films, and that is very energizing to me. You know, we're making a film by Alice Birch, her directorial debut, starring Kate Blanchett, and it is such a dangerous script, and it's something that I just feel like could only be made out of the UK with brave financiers, and it was hopefully marks the arrival of another brilliant female voice. And I also think the challenges at the box office right now, like I look at the UK box office, the US box office right now, for specialty films, and it is terrifying seeing films from people who I really admire not tank, but just not do as well as people hoped. But that kind of puts the pressure on us to be developing and backing films that really can work in the marketplace. And you know, we're doing a film right now called Everybody Wants to Fuck Me, which is a comedy horror, and
I think we're going to move over to the audience questions now. If anyone has a question, feel free to stick your hand up. You've got quite a few. Do you want to start, Ernest?
Thank you to all 5 of you, if I may. Can I just ask, we raise, in a place like this, we raise money for innovation, we raise money for writing, we raise money for startups. No one's ever suggested that for the first-time creator, or heaven forbid, the second time or fifth time creator, we do something similar. Without trying to get into somebody else's shoes like Bristol or BFI, is there a role to try and help?
Sounds good.
do you mean to make films or to nurture a generation of filmmakers?
The nurture.
I mean, the more opportunities there are, the better. So I think that's a good thing.
I mean, you've got to learn your craft, haven't you? I mean, it's like you can read a script from a writer at the beginning of their career and you think, oh, there's a spark there. And then you might read the writer 10 years later and it's just refined. And it's just doing it and doing it and doing it and getting better and better. You have to put the craft in. You have to put the work in.
Yeah, I think there's also a need for for in between films for people to be able to live, and I think that's what's missing. In terms of nurturing, there's not been anyone, unless there used to be things like first look deals where a filmmaker would be able to get some overhead to keep them going to the next film, but they're pretty rare. But that sort of thing is needed a lot. I think one of the reasons maybe that people have gone overseas to make films is just because they need to support themselves, and often on a small independent film, when it comes right down to the wire and they're trying to raise that money, they have to defer a lot of their fees, and they had a budget, had a certain number of fees in the budget, and now they've got less, and so so I think there's that, and it takes a long time to develop a project, so there might be a gap, in which case that's what's needed. I think there's more just to help filmmakers.
It's craft, but it's also freedom to create. So actually, yes, there's sort of, we could have more funding available so that people can practice their craft and learn and get to make things and start their careers. But sometimes there are people who've got their craft, but actually all they need the time to be able to just think, write. And actually some of the new bursaries or sponsorships I've seen, like with some luxury brands, like Chanel do this sponsorship right now with the BFI. It's a really great bursary because they offer like 20k to filmmakers who have made a feature film already, and they don't have to do anything with that £20,000 other than it just gives them the luxury to be able to create and think about and dream up what their next project would be. And I think in our industry sometimes we forget that that's actually the thing that is needed. And so if there were brands or other sponsorships like that would allow already talented individuals to have that time to be able to create, I think that could be an interesting thing.
Do we have any other questions? We'll go up there on the second row in the jumper.
Thank you very much for the panel. It was very interesting. I would like to ask, how could we convince the society that supporting infrastructure for upcoming creatives is a necessary cultural investment so that creatives might achieve a longevity in their career? Because or like at the same time as you said you're excited about like fostering an entertainment industry that's using AI, and I was wondering, while some companies are willing to replace human workers with AI, and whether it be like from creating the structure or making the scenes themselves, do you think there is a contradiction between wanting to sort of invest more in the human resource and also investing in the AI? Thank you.
Tackle that.
In terms of the investing in AI, I mean, I think in the UK, I don't know if there's a lot of the sort of traditional film, and I don't know about broadcasters. I don't know if they're investing a lot in that, but I think a lot of that is coming through from a lot of visual effects companies, special effects companies are investing in AI. I don't know yet if it's at the expense of people in those companies. That might happen, I guess, at some point. I mean, but I don't know in the States whether that's happening, whether some of the major studios and stuff are. I'm sure they are using some of those models to do certain things, but I don't know. But no, I haven't. I mean, I don't think there's necessarily a contradiction yet in the UK between that. I think that there's just I mean, I think there are possibly it's quite a challenge marketplace, so I think there's probably less. I think there have been people in some of the big production companies, you know, have maybe it's harder to find jobs now, and you know they may be, you know, but I think generally, I don't think the technology has really led to that yet.
No.
I think there is a danger of technology making it harder to work as a group, and especially people starting. How do you learn? How do you know? For some, it's more enjoyable being in a room of people and talking, discussing things. And you were suggesting before that maybe writing could perhaps have an AI researcher rather than a team researcher, but it's more enjoyable to have a team of researchers.
God, yeah.
But also, those researchers could be the people who become the next
I can't
next
bear the
writer.
idea that this happens. I mean, you know, it's the notion that you know, how do you stop the instinct to tell a story and to make a film and to, you know, or write a song? I mean, it's in us, isn't it? If it's in you, I can't see. I don't know. I find it a depressing subject, to be honest. But I know it's one that's there, and we have to look at it. But I'm hoping there'll be a balance where we can sort of coexist, because the notion of stopping and suppressing the instinct we've been lucky. We've had an outlet. It's grown and it's come out. But the notion that for you the next generation, that those jobs wouldn't be available to you because we're sticking stuff into a computer in it. I mean, that's very depressing. But yeah,
I would also say for us, like at Film4, the thing that gets us the most excited is like a voice, an exciting voice, and that's something that can only ever be human. So a voice that is always something that is fresh, telling something in a different way, has a unique way of telling the story. So I don't know, that feels like completely separate to AI.
and a film set is such a, you know, if you're on a film set, you're part of that crew for however many weeks or months. I mean, it's an incredibly binding experience. You really are intensely close to people, and you're often away, and so you're in hotels, or you know, whatever you know, that sense of community, that you're doing something, whatever your role is really special, and you work very, very hard, and the hours are very, very long, and you're knackered, and you know, but that sense of doing something and being part of something as a community is really, really, really special. And again, I think we seek that.
It is a very physical job. One thing I am worried about though is reading, and making sure that we don't use AI to do reading, because script reading is such a great entry level role, and it's an amazing way for people to get into development. And you know, we use readers at Film4. Most big companies use, film and TV companies do use readers, and it's a great entry level route into the industry. And I think that's just, we don't use AI reading tools, but that's the thing that kind of worries me, and that's one thing we have to resist.
Yeah.
Does anyone have another question? Guy in the black in the front.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what's a mistake you've made?
It's interesting. Suzanne, Michael,
So I make mistakes. I'm not going to. Don't want to think about them.
That's fair. Or maybe there is, maybe it's sort of that's not how
sure.
one should look at
probably
their
every
career.
day. Do you know what I mean? Little ones and big. I mean, I don't know.
But perhaps that's the answer. It's not. It's sort of not worth focusing on the mistakes such that one pursues with their career.
I've
learning from them,
I've
not-
definitely commissioned things that have not got there.
Yeah.
Like their ideas. Like loved the filmmaker, or loved the idea, but through the development process, we just couldn't quite crack it. And in that instance, sometimes it's just better to like acknowledge it, and well, it is always better to acknowledge it, but not to that will have been a learning there,
Yeah.
but just taking that learning and moving on, and maybe not getting too stuck in a dead end, because I do that. I mean, I'm talking in development. There are often mistakes made in a development process. A note that could take somebody down a pathway which perhaps wasn't that helpful. Like I'm sure I can think of things in like
Yeah.
in a development journey.
Or sometimes not chat. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the minute you started talking, I
Yeah.
thought, oh yeah, I know. I can think of ones, big, but where you sort of get persuaded that something's working. I can think of one project I worked on which was really good until the end, and the director was so passionate that and he was a writer director, so it was, and I really, really admired him. And I really loved what he was doing, and I thought, I just don't think this is right. And he was like, no, absolutely. And I wish I pushed it, because quite a lot of us felt that way, and he dug in, and that was in the end, that didn't work as well as it could have done because of the end. And you see, I really kicked myself about that. But then I also know why I made the decision I did. So. Yeah.
We were talking earlier about a film that I've recently worked on that premiered at a film festival, and I knew it was too long, and we had tried to talk. I'd been honest with the producers, like feeling like actually it still needed work in the edit, but the whole team were adamant that this was the final version of the film, and this was the version of the film that we were going to screen at the festival. Anyway, we screened it at the festival, and it had some lovely reviews, but nearly everyone mentioned the length. And to be fair to the whole team, everybody acknowledged it. We came back from that festival and we recut the film, took out 15 minutes, and then went to the next festival with a shorter, tighter version where the reviews were much better. And so, yeah, we owned up to the mistake, but actually we did something about it, and for the good. But it was a very kind of public way to make a mistake.
I think that's all we have time for, unfortunately. But thank you so much for coming. Thank you to the panel, and thank you to the college. Ernest, would you like to say a few words?
Simply, Mohammed, thank you to each of the five of you. 5.5 years ago, when Jeanette and I came to the college, there was a young man sitting on chapel court with a straw hat on and a guitar singing. And then we discovered he wrote his own songs, and then he wrote things which were creative in a different way and wanted to get into the industry. He started at a level which might make a difference. But for the rest of you, for heaven's sake, take away the idea. You don't stop writing, you don't stop creating, you don't stop singing, you just do it.